Hi, and welcome to Highlines Helps podcast, Breaking the Silence, bringing domestic violence and sexual assault into the light. Angela's daughter, Rebekah Grace, disappeared on July 20th, 2021, near Missoula, Montana. Her vehicle and personal belongings were found off Interstate 90, but Rebekah and her dog were missing. In this episode, we continue talking to Rebekah's mom, Angela, about the events that happened within the first several weeks after her daughter's disappearance. Angela describes the countless obstacles that she and her husband encountered from law enforcement and other agencies instead of the help they expected and deserved. This forced them into having to do much of the footwork and investigation themselves, despite the pushback and downright refusal of the professional agencies and the court system to help in many instances. Another interesting thing, despite the domestic violence that occurred, law enforcement told Angela that her daughter's perpetrator would never be considered a person of interest and refused to investigate in any way in that direction.
The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by guest speakers are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the view of Highlines Help for abused spouses or any of its funders, employees, or board members. Highlines Help acknowledges that our parties mentioned in this podcast are innocent until proven guilty by a court of law, and all statements are the opinions of the guests. The following podcast may contain discussion of domestic and/or sexual violence, stalking, suicide, and PTSD. There is also the possibility of strong language that may be inappropriate for young listeners.
You were talking about the phone call that he had made to you saying that she was missing.
Yes, he texted. He texted and said she was missing, that he was tired of all the drama and the police coming and knocking on his door and asking him questions, that all this had to stop. Like it was just a huge imposition to him, you know. And there was a lot more of the deflection going on as well, because as soon as it became known that Rebekah was missing on social media in Mineral County, the caregiver was posting that Rebekah's dog Cerberus had been reported being seen as far as 50 miles away. And I'm like, in Plains, Montana, and I'm like, same day, dog being seen 50 miles away. It just all sounded like such a deflection. Like, let's get the eyes off this area over to here. But also the deflection negated Rebekah. The talk was all about the dog, and Rebekah was referred to as the handler, not the owner.
And was this a friend of his that...
No, it was his caregiver.
But how did he become his caregiver?
Through some caregiver agency in Missoula.
Oh, okay. So he didn't have knowledge of this person prior to...
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
After Rebekah left, he was assigned 2 caregivers from this agency in Missoula. But at the forefront, she was very vocal about the relationship between Rebekah's dog, Sirs, and Rebekah, that Rebekah was the handler. She never called Rebekah the owner.
That's interesting. The handler.
I thought so too. Yeah, I thought so too. So there was a lot of deflection. There was a lot of, well, the car was found at mile marker 72. The phone call came in from a family from Oregon, which I made a plea on social media. It went rampant, but nobody ever called to say I was the one. I mean, in the meantime, almost a year later, Judge Marks said the call could be released with a gag order on it. So that really does no value to anybody. You know, I mean, it's got a gag order. so whatever. And then the police say there's a video on Rebekah's phone that Rebekah videotaped. And at first they couldn't open and access Rebekah's phone, so they had to take it to Helena. At least this is what I was informed. They had to take it to Helena to get access to her phone. Rebekah had her phone set up that when it was near a cell tower, it would automatically upload videos she had taken. To this day, that video has never uploaded. Now, mind you, every day or every week, I'll check the phone, and there are old idiot videos and old photos that upload from the cloud, because at one point she had so much information on the cloud that you had to pay for extra storage. And that lapsed because I didn't know about it until we got the phone, the robo-type phone. And so for like 3 months it lapsed. But it's continually pulling, but it's pulling old stuff. Everything that's new and current has been on there since day one. It has never uploaded a video that they say was taken on her phone. And I find that, I'm not an IT person, but I just find that odd, because they would have had to have had access to a cell tower.
Right.
To access her phone.
Yeah.
And what they informed me was, we've never had so much information to go through. She had so much information. And I don't know if it was overwhelming or not, but after I got access to the cloud, I started going through things, and Rebekah was a photo taker of scenery and trees and her dog, Cerberus, not so much people. And she would take multiple photographs a day. But on one particular day, July 2nd, 2021, she had a picture of a van, and she had a picture of the VIN number of the van. And I'm going, Rebekah never mentioned that she was looking to buy a van. Law enforcement didn't question that. And so I called my private investigator, and I asked him if they could run the plates, because you could see the Montana plate, and run the VIN number. So we got the address and the owner of the van, and come to find out, my daughter, Rebekah, she was at Council Grove State Park that day, and somebody was throwing rocks at Cerberus, her dog, in the lake or the river. I'm not sure what part, but they were throwing rocks and hitting the dog. And Rebekah was getting upset. And so she went back up to a parking lot, and the only car that was there was the van, and she couldn't see anybody else around. So she left a note on the van on a piece of cardboard, something about, you shouldn't be throwing rocks at the dog or my dog or whatever, get a life. And we didn't know that. And I didn't even see or find that picture until between Thanksgiving and Christmas, which is holiday time. And by that time, nobody was working on Rebekah's case. No agency anywhere was working on it. And so I waited until after Christmas. And I went and knocked on the door, took a missing person flyer. Nobody answered. I taped the missing person flyer to the door and put my phone number on it. Please call me. And I put a note, that my daughter's missing and she had a photograph of your van, and I just need to ask a question. And nobody ever called me, so my PI started calling them and their family to get somebody to respond. Mm-hmm. So they responded, and I've been in communication with the family. Private investigator has been in communication with the family, and the story was that there were members of the family at that lake that day, but they were floating on the river, and they came back and found that note. They kept it for months, but nobody ever called them. So law enforcement never called me either. They never called and said, your daughter has all kinds of photographs, 10 to 20 photographs a day, but on this particular day, there's only 2. And so by that time, they couldn't find the card. Rebekah had written it on a piece of cardboard, and they couldn't find it. We personally think she was being stalked that day. And, in fact, I did post 3 vehicles, a picture of 3 vehicles that I thought might have been involved, and I got a message immediately on Facebook Messenger. You need to take those down. But, law enforcement doesn't put any value in it. Everything we have found has been sent our way. I don't think we would have found anything at all had we stayed in Virginia. But yet, even though we have found and submitted information, it doesn't get processed. It's as if it doesn't exist. And that's what's infuriating.
I can understand that. Have you ever gone in and asked them, I assume you kept copies of everything you gave, but have you ever asked them if they could give you a copy of what they have in their file?
Yeah, we have submitted FOIA requests and CCJI requests. At this point in time, we've been informed by a third party that Rebekah's case is open as a criminal investigation. And my own personal opinion is that as long as the state of Montana keeps it open as a criminal investigation, they don't have to release anything. And every 6 months I send a CCJI request every 6 months with a letter asking for an update, because as I'm a primary and a secondary victim in my daughter's case. Mm-hmm. I'm a secondary victim because Rebekah was the primary victim in the missing person and her death. I'm a primary victim because on October 31st, 2021, we received a phone call stating that the trailer, which was Rebekah's rental trailer that we were staying in, was highly combustible, and they suggested that we take the necessary precautions. So at that point, we became a primary victim.
Why was it?
Of arson.
Why was it highly combustible?
Because we were staying in Montana and asking too many questions.
Oh, I can understand that. Okay.
Yeah, it was an arson threat. So we filed the report with Missoula City because that's where Rebekah lived in her trailer. Missoula City filed the report but transferred it to Missoula County within 2 days because Missoula County had been involved. They came on board 10 days after Rebekah went missing. The sheriff in Missoula contacted Mineral County and said, hey, you don't have enough staff to handle this. We'll help you with this case. And so Missoula came on board. But 10 days is a long time in a missing person case. I mean, if you don't catch the information within the first 24 hours, you can't go back and recreate that scene.
Right.
You can't go back and take cadaver dogs in. You can't too much time. You can't go back and take scent dogs in. It's too much time has gone by. But I mean, I was forever grateful that they came in and offered their services. At that point in time, they were doing papers, trying to figure stuff out on paper. They did have their search and rescue team come in and do more searches on the water. Missoula County was the one going through Rebekah's phone, and they never asked questions. And so all that time transpired. I didn't know about making a prototype of a phone until my attorney mentioned it after I got conservatorship. So, which I'm thankful for and grateful for, but that was more time delay. And then the only way I can explain is no family should ever have to go through this, because it's like when you hear that your daughter's missing or your child's missing, it is a shock to the brain and to the heart, to the body. It is just like a tsunami, earthquake, a tornado. It's all at once, and you can't process quick enough. So a lot of times you get caught in the whirlwind, much like the victim of domestic violence trying to break out. You just get caught up and you're trying to sort out And what they really need is a liaison to come in. Each family have a missing person or domestic violence. And I know they try to do that with the CVAs. You really need somebody that can come in and just be beside you and say, okay, this is our next step. This is what we need to do next. And I was literally fighting for everything. I was trying to figure out, well, why isn't law enforcement accepting reports? Why aren't they processing reports? Why am I beating the door down to submit a DNA swab? Why are they not offering me that? I mean, I was writing DCI daily and calling them weekly. Why can't I get a DNA swab done so that when they find the body, they have it? Why can't I get that done? And finally, after months and months and weeks, finally, DCI wrote me back and said, I don't know why you can't get this done, but I will contact Mineral County now. And so it shouldn't be that hard.
No.
I was doing their job. I was the one that went around to Rebekah's dentist and asked for her dental x-rays. And one of the dentists called the police on me. I have that recording because when I requested all 911 calls regarding Rebekah Barsotti, that was one of the calls I received. That I had given him my guardianship papers. I told him who I was. I gave him my ID. And I said, I'm just here to get her dental records. And they said, well, police do that. And I said, well, they're not doing it. And I'm her guardian. So I'd like them. So they called the police department on me. And I'm like, do your job,
Yeah.
I mean, and then I was told that they don't request dental records until after they find a body. And I'm like, that makes no sense to me because in the medical field, after some offices as few as 5 years, but usually after 7 years, all records are destroyed now because they just don't have the ability to maintain. And I said, so what do you do with people who are missing and you don't find a body for 10 years and you don't have any dental records?
Good question.
Yeah. So that just, I felt like I should have been on payroll for law enforcement because it was just like, I'm doing your job. Why am I doing your job? But I'm the mother. I'm the grieving mother. I'm trying to figure this out, and I can honestly say that had Jerry and I not picked up and gone to Montana, come here after Rebekah went missing, and this is confirmed by Sheriff Toth, that there would have been no search effort. Because when we met with Sheriff Toth, one of his first comments to us was that he wasn't even going to look for Rebekah. And I was like, she was a victim of domestic violence. According to your Montana code, you have to. And he said, who do you think she is? The president?
Really?
Yeah. So I know without a shadow of a doubt, had we not come here, there would have been no effort at all.
So you would say without a shadow of doubt that the whole entire system let Rebekah down and you?
Definitely.
All the way around?
All the way around. All the way around. Because you start out a relationship with an agency that says they weren't going to look for her, so that doesn't give you any confidence that they're going to do their best. I mean, it really doesn't. And then you have another agency that comes in, Missoula, 10 days later. Thank God they did. But you're asking questions and you're not getting a response. You're not getting an answer. We started asking for a follow-up meeting with Missoula in August, and Jerry and I went to Mineral County Courthouse asking for all public documents and record regarding Rebekah and David, and we were told there were none. In September, and I still don't know who this savvy journalist is, an investigative journalist called Mineral County Courthouse and asked for the affidavit of probable cause. I'm not a legal person. I didn't even know there was such a thing. We just asked for documents. Apparently, they were told none existed the first time. But the journalist said, excuse me, there was a PFMA and a standing order of no contact. There has to be documentation as to why the standing order of no contact was put in place. I received this call, and they tell me that they're calling me because it's a journalist from the local media, and they don't know what they're going to do with the information, and they don't want me blindsided watching the 6 o'clock news. I'm like, well, I don't understand, because we asked for all documentation, and we were told there was none. And we were told, well, it got misfiled. We had to look for it. So that's another point where the system lets you down. But then we find out that, and this is what Rebekah wouldn't tell me, that she reported that David had threatened to blow both of her hands off that night. When I read it, I'm sitting there and I'm going, how do you blow both of somebody's hands off? I mean, Rebekah's not a drinker, so she wouldn't have been, intoxicated. She's a fighter. She's a fighter. She would have fought back.
Yeah.
Might have been at her own risk in her own life, but she would have fought back. And then I just couldn't figure out the concept. And then I would remember her saying, Mom, it's like he's Superman. He has these moments like Superman. And I'm thinking, well, I guess he would have just overpowered her. But then when we went to the hearing 6 months later, so in March of 2022, in the video captured by the deputy that arrived on the scene, David is taking handcuffs out of his pockets when the deputy asks him to empty his pockets. And I'm sitting there in the courtroom and I'm going, that's how he was going to do it. He was going to handcuff her. But nobody puts two and two together.
But they never questioned why he had handcuffs in his pocket?
Oh, no. The deputy was more impressed with the brand of handcuffs that David had. There was a whole conversation about the fact that they were something called peerless handcuffs and how the deputy couldn't even afford to get a pair of those.
Oh.
So that's what the conversation on videotape was about around the handcuffs.
Wow.
Not, why do you have those?
So you bring up this no contact order a lot. How long did they issue this no contact order for? Because usually no contact orders are only issued for up to 72 hours.
Well, it was still in effect when Rebekah went missing. I don't remember the exact expiration date. Initially, they were supposed to go to court in August. And then Rebekah went missing, so it got pushed back to September. And then I don't remember why, but in September, it got pushed back to March. And when I asked the deputy county attorney at that time, I said, why do they keep pushing it back? And the response was, well, they hope people will forget. And I said, well, I'm not going to let them do that. And that's pretty much when we decided to stay.
Okay.
If they were going to silence Rebekah and they were going to try to silence us, which they had done, nobody was talking about Rebekah missing. Jerry and I literally beat on K-Pax's door one morning before they opened, like it was 7 o'clock in the morning. And we were there beating on the door. Cleaning man came by and opened the doors and unlocked them. I said, I need to talk to somebody. Y'all aren't answering your phones. I need to talk to somebody. So he went and got the editor-in-chief that was there, and he came out and talked to us, and he brought his team out to videotape a statement. I said, nobody's talking about my daughter, but she's missing. And nobody was talking about the domestic violence either.
Yeah.
But every time they said something about the domestic violence, they always followed it up with the Sheriff Department of Mineral County says there is no connection. They always followed it up with that.
Always followed up with that.
Yeah. And
there was no connection between
the domestic violence and the missing persons. Yeah, her being missing.
Now, you said that they found her car.
Yes.
First. And then they found
personal belongings
on a riverbank.
Yeah, I think the personal belongings were found first, and then I don't know the order, but I think somebody saw the personal belongings on the riverbank and then realized that her car was in the parking lot as well. because on the riverbank, it was at St. John's Fishing Access in Alberton. And, of course, the riverbank is down by the river, but the parking lot is not on the same level. The parking for the truck parking, it's a truck stop, is up by the highway. And so then you have to walk down the access road to get to the riverbank.
Was this a pretty popular area?
Very popular.
Where there would be
a lot of people
that would be down on the riverbank?
Yes. In fact,
playing in the water.
Yeah. In fact, when my sister and I met deputies there that weekend, the following weekend, he's getting out of the car and he's going, no one ever comes to this side of the rock. I guess that's the east side. Well, no one ever goes to that side of the rock, but there was a family of 10 or 12 people there in the same exact location that supposedly Rebekah's items had been found. I said, well, why didn't you secure this? Why isn't this area secured? And he goes, well, we didn't want to scare people. And then up at the top near the parking lot, there was an area secured. And we went up there and I go, why is this area secured? He goes, well, in case if Rebekah walked down the back side of the rock, which was so overgrown with brush that there's no way she would have walked down that, and not with her and her dog. But there's just no way a human being would not have walked through all that brush when you could walk down the access path.
Right.
And I thought, this just makes no sense at all to me. It just makes no sense. And then when I asked at the county commissioners meeting about everything, sheriff said it was 5 o'clock when they got the phone call and that the sun was setting. And I'm going, on July 20th at Alberton, Montana, the sun was not getting ready to set at 5 or 5:30.
Not even close.
Not even close. Not even close. And I actually have documentation from a woman that owns a bookstore in Alberton that actually documents the weather every day. And I think sunset was like at 9 o'clock or something, close to that. And I'm like, you weren't anywhere near dusk at that time. The area is very well populated. It's a popular point that people go cliff jumping. And right above the area is Alberton Gorge, and Montana River Guides and all the other river guides put in there. And then they put in above Alberton Climbing Rock. So it's very well populated, and there's always people on that river. And we asked, did you notice any trucks? Because it's a truck stop. They noticed nothing. They said, well, we don't know. What do you mean you don't know? If there had been a truck there, I would have been up there banging on the door saying, do you have a truck cam? And did you have it on for the past couple hours? Can we see it?
Yeah.
That's what I would have been asking. I would have been beating on the door, even if they were asleep. And I would have been beating on the door till they woke up.
So was this a place that she went often?
No.
Or do you know?
No. I've never heard her talk about it.
Okay.
She was supposed to go to the Big Eddy in Superior. That's originally where she had wanted to take Cerberus to play in the water. I was really surprised when I got the call or the text, and then I found out it was at Alberton Climbing Rock. Now, Alberton Climbing Rock would have been on the way home from Superior.
Okay.
Back to Missoula. I don't understand. I know that there was a conversation between Rebekah and Bevan about playing with the dogs, and Bevan saying, oh, I really don't like to be around dogs or service dogs, because Cerberus was a service dog, which didn't make any sense because Bevan is, or was, David Barsotti's caregiver, and David Barsotti trains service dogs. But she was uncomfortable being around service dogs. So none of that makes any sense.
No, it doesn't.
So that doesn't make any sense. There were two employees from Town Pump that attempted to file a report stating that they saw David at Town Pump the day Rebekah was there to meet Bevan.
This was when she was picking up
Yeah, her
stuff
personal
that they-
belongings. Yeah.
that kept calling about.
But apparently that has no value, according to Mineral County. Town Pump is a very, very affluent and a very well-established organization here in Montana.
Yes, it is.
And they have really crappy video footage because the video footage is very granular. From Mineral County Independent Valley Press, for some reason, got to view the footage first. And he said that it was so bad that he couldn't even, and he knows Rebekah. And he said he would not be able to swear that it was video footage of Rebekah. That's how bad it was. And I don't know if I'm guessing it was in Mineral County since they were the investigating agency, but I'm not certain. They only requested camera footage from 2 cameras at Town Pump and Superior. And Town Pump and Superior has 12 cameras, but they only requested footage from 2. And 2 looking in the same direction. Nothing from the back side where the truckers go or where the guys park their trucks or anything. And no footage from inside the store.
Really?
Yeah. And when I contacted Town Pump, so did my private investigator. They had already destroyed all other tapes from that day. So then they started a dialogue, but they, about as a major organization in the state of Montana that is particularly available for truckers and for easy on, easy off access, that I would hope they would have the best digital and videography equipment in their stores. And that I would also hope that if they know of a missing person or a criminal act that occurred at their store, that they would then protect and preserve all video from that day.
Right.
And I did not receive a response. And when I called to follow up, I would always get disconnected. So people don't like it when you ask a question or make a suggestion to improve their services.
So you said that there was a couple of the employees that attempted to make a report that they had seen David there.
Yes.
Earlier in the day.
Yes.
And they got shut down.
It's my understanding they got shut down.
So they did not write out anything?
Not to my knowledge. I've not been given any information on the case.
Okay.
In fact, when my sister and I met with Ryan, it was 5-6 days after Rebekah went missing. I asked if I could see a copy of the report, and he had told me he had not had time to write it up yet.
Well, that just kind of tells you that he never wrote it up.
Exactly.
And that he doesn't plan to.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I've had that same experience.
And the missing person report was actually filed by, to my understanding, it was actually filed by Detective Swafstedt at Missoula County. Now, Missoula County did not pick up the case till 10 days after Rebekah went missing. So nothing was even submitted to NamUs until after Missoula County picked it up.
Did they ever actually look for her?
In the water.
In the water?
In the water, they looked for her. After David informed them we were coming out. So David called my husband. He didn't call me, and he never calls my husband. But that Thursday, he called my husband, and he said, Rebekah would never want her mom to see her dead. We were at a restaurant having lunch with the grandkids, and Jerry got up and walked out of the restaurant, and he came back, and he said, I just had the strangest conversation. And I said, well, who was that? He goes, it was David. And I said, David never calls you. And he goes, I know. And he said, Rebekah would never want you to see her dead. And I went hysterical. I'm like, well, how does he know she's dead? How does he know that? I had already he had called, let's see, I guess Wednesday, I had texted and said, I'm coming out. And he texted back and said, let me handle this. That's when I made plans to go out. I was like,
Right.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
You're going to handle this? She had a PFMA against you. Why are, you didn't have her best interest in mind while she was alive and before she went missing. Why would you have her best interest in mind now? So then he called Jerry, and then I left Friday to come out. But in the meantime, David had informed Mineral County that I was coming out. And so during the time that he informed Mineral County I was coming out and I got there, I think they had called Kootenai County dive team to come out, and Flathead to come out.
And how many days now have passed?
So the 20th, 21st, 22nd, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think the first actual in-water search was on the 23rd or the 24th. So when I got there, I had no idea what the sheriff's department was like. I'm thinking I'm going to walk in, it's going to be fully staffed, fully forced. I mean, that's what we have back east. I'm like, there's going to be 100 cops on staff,
Oh, silly you.
I know, right? There's going to be detectives and investigators and, that's what we have back east. So that's what I expected. I walk in and Patrick meets me on Saturday. I had actually gone to Walmart and got all kinds of Gatorade and power drinks and granola bars. I'm thinking these guys are putting everything they have into it because...
Oh, they have.
I'm thinking, okay, so I can at least give them some snacks and power foods to get them through. And so I present there with that, and Patrick introduced himself, and he said, I'm not the one that responded to the missing person call, but I am the one who responded to the domestic violence call. He looked at me and he goes, you are not what we expected. At that point, all I had done was introduce myself and say, I'm Rebekah Barsotti's mom, and I'm here to give you guys some power snacks and power drinks. That was the introduction I gave them. It wasn't, I'm here to tell you how to do your job or what are you doing or anything like that. I was actually going in to say, here, I hope this will help you. Can you please give it to whoever's working on this, And
the only thing he could say to you is you're not what he expected.
Yeah. Because you're not
what?
You're not what we expected. Well, that led me to believe that David had painted one of his stories.
Okay.
So they already had an impression. And so I just said, well, I don't know what you expected, but this is why I'm here. My daughter's missing in your county. And I'm looking for some answers.
So this was from the 21st.
Yeah, the 21st.
21st when he texted and said she was missing.
Yeah, well, he texted the night of the 20th, and then I got it on the 21st.
Okay. And now this is the 25th.
Yeah. And there was a flurry of events because when I got into town, when I got into Missoula, I got off the airplane in the afternoon. Within a half an hour of checking into the hotel, I received a phone call. And the phone call was from Missoula County detectives. That was on the 23rd of July. I met with them, and then they wanted to meet with me at Rebekah's trailer later that evening. So later that evening, I met them at Rebekah's trailer, and they handed me the keys. They went in. They ransacked her place, and they took her laptop, and they took a hairbrush, and I don't know what else they took. They took a bunch of other stuff, but I remember they took her laptop. I'm like, you're in shock, and I'm thinking to myself, why are they taking her laptop?
Right.
Why aren't they asking David to see his laptop? I asked that question later, But they said that that would infringe upon David's rights as citizen of Montana.
How would that infringe on his
privacy? His right to privacy.
Because he would be, I would believe that he would be a prime suspect because of the
PFMA.
The PFMA.
Well, actually, Sheriff Toft squelched that. He informed us that David was not a person of interest and never would be. So they confiscated her laptop. They confiscated several other items, gave me the keys to her trailer, and said David has already been in contact with Plum Realty to close her trailer up.
So had David been in her trailer?
Well, that's what we want to know. Now, there was footage that came out later that showed video footage into Rebekah's trailer. So that actually reinforced the thought from July 2nd when we found out about the ban and the activity at Council Grove State Park that she was being stalked. I mean, where else does the video footage come from?
Right.
It was, and while we were staying at Rebekah's, Jerry and I kept saying, how do people know what's going on and what we're talking about? And Jerry looked everywhere, but of course now these little things are so tiny, but he looked everywhere to see if there was a microphone anywhere or anything. And this was actually the video footage that was submitted, or the camera footage that was submitted of the shots, was from the outside in to Rebekah's trailer. Now, Rebekah had taken this film and put it on all of her windows and blackout curtains on her windows because of the heat. And it was a trailer, so they get hotter in the summer, except for one sash window where she had left that unfiltered so that, because she was tall enough that she could see out, because she wanted to see out if somebody had come on her on the property and up to the door. And in retrospect, there was a covering, like a deck covering, and slats of lumber. And I'm willing to bet a camera was up there somewhere, looking straight in.
Looking right through the window.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I've thought about going back and knocking on the door just to introduce myself and say, I just want to see the deck.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to see the deck.
Huh. But again, this was not something that law enforcement found interesting enough to pursue any kind of
search or anything.
Or anything?
No. They pretty much disregarded everything that was submitted.
And why would they take her laptop?
Exactly. That's what I want to know. Why would they take her laptop? And it has been a fight to get it back. We actually received a court order that I could receive a copy of the contents of the laptop. The first time, the county attorney told me that she didn't think that could be done physically. And I'm like, excuse me, they copy disk drives all the time. You just hook up a wire and hook it into the back of the laptop and hook it up to the new disk drive, and you do a direct copy. Because I'm not an IT person, but I know IT people who know how to do that. And she goes, oh, I just don't think that we know how to do that. I'm like, well, you don't have to do it. Hire somebody, you know? And then the second time we asked, and she still wasn't sure that that was something that could technologically be accomplished. Then...
You just clone it.
Yeah, exactly. But there was always like, well, we don't know how to do that. And I'm like, well, then hire somebody who does. We've never got to this day. We've never received a copy. And we actually think last year in 2023, we had a hearing. And for a segment of like 10 days, David's attorney was like incessantly demanding that Rebekah's personal items be returned to David immediately. But I had a court order saying that I was allowed to inspect them. Of course, this was 2022. So, but of course, by that time, I had left the state and gone back to Virginia. I mean, we just ran out of money, ran out of, you know, it just, we couldn't keep going house to house and Airbnb. We just didn't have those kind of funds. So we went back home. After I got back home, then it became so very important for all of Rebekah's personal items to be immediately returned to David. I'm like going through all my notes with my attorneys and stuff, and I'm going, we jumped through hoops. Like I had a friend who knew guns, and he was willing to go down to the Mineral County Sheriff's Office immediately. And all I wanted him to do was write down the serial numbers to make sure that those serial numbers matched the ones from the evidence list that I had been provided by Missoula County. Then the clothing that was found at the riverbank, there was a shirt there that I know Rebekah would have never worn. And I know that because of the colors, because Rebekah hated pink. And there was pink in it. And I know she would have never worn it. I don't even think it was her shirt. And I asked a friend of hers that had worked with her, I said, do you know Rebekah's style of clothing well enough? And do you know her personal belongings well enough to go down and at least identify and take pictures for me and make a list? Yes, I can be available. And it was a week span. All they had to do was tell my attorney when. They returned the items. I know this, that I know this, that I know this. They never contacted my attorney. I'm certain they returned the items because a chain of custody cannot be presented. And when you return evidence, it has to be signed off by the county attorney, is my understanding. I've never gotten a copy of that. And when we went to court the day after Labor Day, Deputy County Attorney was there at court. And he said, and I have it in a transcript, we had to return the items to David. The whole purpose of that court hearing was to establish the returning of the personal items. And Walter Congdon said, we can't create an inventory list. And I'm going, what do you mean you can't create? I mean, I'm not allowed to say this in court, but that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, what do you mean you can't create an inventory list? You record what you're returning.
Right, yeah.
It's that simple. And then you compare that inventory list with the inventory list from the beginning of this case. He said, no, we're just going to put down miscellaneous items. Judge Jason Marks agreed to that. And it wasn't until after we left the hearing, and I'm looking at my attorney, and I'm going, he's already returned the items. That's why they can't give an itemized list, because they don't remember what they had in their possession. And some of what they are in so much controversy about was never on the initial inventory list. Like at the county commissioners meeting, Sheriff Toth said, well, we recovered the box Rebekah was supposed to pick up. It's not on the inventory list. Well, we recovered the bong Rebekah was supposed to pick up. It's not on the inventory list. Well, we recovered the pot Rebekah was supposed to pick up. It's not on the inventory list. So none of it is on the inventory list. And in fact, when you look at the video footage from Napa Auto in Superior, I reached out to my private investigator. I said, can you contact them and ask them if their camera has always been in the same position? And he did. And it's always been in the same position. And it actually looks like the back of the truck that's open has the box in it going back up towards David's. None of this makes sense.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't make any sense at all.
And I wouldn't know any of this had we not gone out to Month. And, you know, and when the, and then going back to the whole trailer thing, when the detectives gave me her keys, they said he's already contacted her to close this up. He wanted to close it up today. And I'm going, what if she's found? I mean, at that point in time, it's less than a week, and I'm believing with all my heart that Rebekah's going to be found and that she should not have to go back to her abuser, and that she should have a safe place to go. And I wasn't even at the place where I thought she'd be like beat up and, you know, totally incapacitated or have to be in the hospital for months or anything. I wasn't there. I was like, my daughter's going to be found and she's going to have a safe place to come back to, and I can stay here in Montana and help her as long as I need to, since this is where she loves to be. That was my thought. And I was like, how can he say, and it's a standing order of no contact. How did he know her address? How did he, unless she, and I did find on her YouTube history, she had YouTube videos, how to tell if you're being tracked.
Okay.
So even Rebekah was wondering if she was being tracked. I'm like, law enforcement didn't mention any of this, and I don't even know that they bothered to look.
Okay, so, well, you're still in Virginia. He calls Jerry and says, I know that she would not want her mother to see her dad.
Yes.
And then a few days later, he's trying to close up her trailer house.
Yes.
Yet he's not a person of
interest.
And
never will be.
Wow.
And he fought tooth and nail. We talked to a wonderful Christian woman. We're indebted to her. She allowed us to assume, in Montana, there's a lot of different kinds of laws we're not used to back east, but she worked it out with her attorneys that we could assume Rebekah's trailer.
Okay.
So the lease was rewritten in our name. We assumed the duration of the lease. So the lease was supposed to renew in April of 2022. April 1st, I think, or somewhere around there. And then, so we started, I mean, we paid Rebekah's rent in August because she had already paid July. And so we paid Rebekah's rent in August, we paid her car payment in August, we paid her utilities in August, we paid everything. And then when we renewed the lease, our lease started in September. And so we transferred her utilities into our name. But then we received the death threat. And I informed Jennifer of the death threat because the trailer is hers, it's not mine, and it wasn't Rebekah's. And so she would have somebody come over once a week and do a check of the skirting to make sure that the skirting on the trailer had not been dislodged.
Who told you that this trailer was?
Oh, that we received the call from Nathan, who is a friend of David's, or was a friend. I don't know that he still is a friend. I don't know that because Nathan came out with this information, but he also made it public by providing the audio and videotapes to Lauren with Hidden True Crime.
Okay.
And then they were also submitted to Mineral County Police Department. But even though there is a segment of one of the audio tapes where David says, this is David, Mineral County says that they can't verify it's him. And so I said, well, send it up the chain. Either DCI or FBI has a voice analysis recognition. And you all talk to David every day on the phone. And I knew that because I had a copy of his phone records from him when he and Rebekah were on the same account. So I knew that. And I said, so you talk to somebody on the phone every day and you can't recognize this voice? Yeah. And they said, no, we can't. And I said, well, so ask FBI to do a voice analysis. Oh, no, we can't do that.
So anything that you suggested, it couldn't be done. I mean, like the cloning of the computer couldn't be done.
Correct. So. And then later, when we went to court over personal representation, who was going to be Rebekah's personal representative, David received appointment because they were married and not legally divorced or legally separated. Rebekah had been gone, and Rebekah had been separate and apart from David for 132 days. In Montana, it's 180 days before you can file for legal separation, or so I understand. My argument was that she had moved out of the marital home. She had established her own utilities, was paying her own car payment, had a job, wasn't being compensated financially by David, and establishing that time period of 180 days, but she went missing at 132. My conversation with my attorney was that her intent was to fulfill the 180 days so that she could file for a separation.
Why would she file for separation compared to filing for divorce?
Well, I mean, it could be separation or divorce, but she couldn't do anything for 180 days by the Montana Code. I think it's 40-4 or 104. There's a separation of 180 days that's required. And so my argument and conversation with my attorney was, if Rebekah had to file a PFMA charge against David because he didn't have her best interest in mind before she left the marriage, okay, why would he have her best interest in mind after she left the marriage? And why would he have her best interest in mind if she was ever found?
Right.
I mean,
but he's already determined
she's dead.
She's dead.
Yeah, and that was done within days.
Yeah.
You know, the personal representation was awarded to David. We never had the opportunity to make our argument because even despite multiple motions, multiple filings, Judge Marks did not acknowledge them. They just sat on his desk. They were never acknowledged. So then we went to the Montana Supreme Court because counsel suggested that the only way to get the judge to make a decision was to file a claim against the estate. Now, mind you, Rebekah had no money. There was the house, and Rebekah wanted half of the house. And Rebekah's last conversation with me, I had tried to encourage Rebekah to walk away from the house. I told her, I said, it's not worth it. I said, when your dad and I divorced, I wanted out so bad. I gave him 70% equity. I said, I didn't want him to ever have to come back to me and say, you didn't give me enough. I need more or anything. I just wanted it done. I refinanced the house in my name when I got divorced. I assumed all that debt. And I said, but it was what I was willing to do because it was still less expensive than going and renting an apartment somewhere.
Yeah.
So my suggestion to Rebekah had been walk away. Count your losses and walk away. You will get another home someday. Her last words to me were, I will let a judge decide. But what I have found out is that Rebekah didn't have a chance at Montana, even in a courtroom. She didn't have a chance. She didn't have a chance at the PFMA hearing. She didn't have a chance at the estate hearing because they called it an estate. Judge Marks and no one in the judicial system ever treated this case as a domestic violence case.
Okay.
They all treated it from a civil standpoint.
Okay, so they just figured she walked off into the woods with the dog and
yes,
to do her own thing.
Yes.
That was as concerned as they appeared to be.
Yes. And so because it got caught up in civil court and never transferred to whatever court process would consider domestic violence outside of the PFMA trial, it just got wrapped up in civil.
Right.
And then, of course, the PFMA trial, David was acquitted. He was found not guilty, primarily based on the fact that Rebekah was not there, because the jury could not be informed Rebekah was missing. Because they could not be informed Rebekah was missing, nobody knew or was aware that I was her appointed guardian during that time. We had 3 witnesses, character witnesses, ready to go on the stand to give testimony. None of them were called forth.
Which court were you in? We were in lower court?
We were in Mineral County's lower court.
Okay, so you were in Justice Court?
Yes.
Okay.
We were in Justice Court, and we found out that Justice Court does not transcribe. They do not videography it. They don't videotape it. I must have called 25 different court reporters and court transcriptionists. Nobody was available. So what we did was there were multiple people peppered throughout the courtroom that had their recorders on.
Oh, okay.
So I have a recording, audio recording of the entire hearing. And that was our last recourse.
Right. And that was because she didn't show up. Then courts were able then to say we had no choice but to drop it because the alleged victim
Didn't show up. Right. And
so there's we have no proof whatsoever that this ever happened. It's, it's not even a he said, she said thing.
right. And David's attorney made sure to make the point that Rebekah was not present. He told the jury that she could not even be bothered to come to the hearing.
But yet he knew that she was missing?
Yes, he knew she was missing. He was well aware. The judge was well aware. The deputy county attorney was well aware that she was missing. The crime victim advocate that stood in, that was appointed to me that day because Rebekah's crime victim advocate was not available, was aware she was missing.
And again, there was no objection to it.
No, there was no objection. I really think that everything was decided before we walked in to the courtroom, because one of the first words spoken were, "We won't be here long today."
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that comment more than once.
Yeah. So,
It won't take long.
no, it won't take long.
Because we already know what the outcome's going to be.
Yes. And then there were several times where there was a recess to the judge's chambers with David, the judge, and the deputy county attorney. And I'm thinking to myself, if Rebekah was here, Rebekah would have been involved in that recess. I mean, she would have been part of the court process. And I was the guardian. I should have been part of that. But because they weren't allowed to be informed that Rebekah was missing, then nobody, I mean, if I got up and went back to the judge's chambers for a recess meeting, people would be going, why is she going back there? Who is she?
This wasn't a jury trial, was it?
Yes.
It was a jury trial in justice court over a PFMA.
Yes. And it took them, we didn't even have the jury selected until, I'm going to say 11 o'clock, 11:30. And one of the jurors, which I understand legally, it's not an issue, but to me, it was principle. It was the issue. One of their legislative representatives was on the jury, and he is the appointed legislative representative for Superior. And so if he didn't know about Rebekah's case, he shouldn't be in his position.
Right.
Because it's his job to know everything that's going on in Superior. And he should have been aware, and he should have recused himself.
So is this PFMA, but he was being charged felony, or it was a misdemeanor?
Well, it's a misdemeanor until the strike three.
Yeah, they have to be convicted.
They have to be convicted each time
before it becomes a felony. So in a misdemeanor, I'm trying to get this straight in my head. So we've got a misdemeanor PFMA that is in justice court. It's a trial, not just a hearing, because when somebody is, of course, this wasn't an order of protection. It was a no contact order.
Right.
So what was the hearing about? Because
about the personal family member assault charge against David.
Okay.
I mean, it gets stranger than that.
Yeah, because I don't understand. I mean, usually the justice court judge makes that decision. I guess I'm going to have to go back and read some of this, I guess, because I've never heard of them doing a jury trial.
There was a jury selection, and it took quite a while, and there were people who I knew, and they would come up to me after they had been selected, and they would come up and they would say, I declined, and this is why I declined. So I know it was, I'm confident in my understanding and that it was a jury trial.
Okay.
And then at the end of both parties being able to give their side of this, I don't even say both parties, Rebekah wasn't there, both representatives to give their presentation, the jury broke and went into a separate room to determine the verdict. I mean, this was a really crazy day because originally we received a text that it was going to be held in the water utility building. And I'm like, what? You know? And then, why isn't this being held in the courtroom? And then I received another text that it would be held in the courtroom. It was almost as though people were trying to create a lot of confusion as to where to go, who to report to, when to report. It
just seems really odd that that system that you're explaining is
Mineral County. I can sum it up real quick.
Okay.
Mineral County does what it wants to, and it's not held to accountability.